All right, so we're going to kick off the May meetup of the cronR user group. Today, we're very honored to have Frans van Dunné. He is the Chief Data Officer at Expantia, based out of Costa Rica, where he helps companies take advantage of it and use their data effectively. And I met Frans back at the RStudio conference in 2020, when one of the few conferences got snuck in at the beginning of 2020. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Frans, and he's really a great asset in our community. Webinars, he has a podcast, all kinds of things. It's really great, all the stuff he does. And so I invited him to speak to our group, and he accepted. So I'm very glad he did. And he's going to talk to us today about automating business processes. So with that, Frans, I'm going to make you a host, and then you can share your screen.
Great, thank you very much. I'm co-host now. So here it goes. Can you see my screen? Let me move this.
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. So yes, hello. I'm very happy to be presented here in this Use Our group. I think it's a great thing that there's so many all over the world, and that we can share talks, and get to know each other better this way. So John, thank you again very much for the invitation. Right. I'm going to talk today about automating business processes with R, but I want to do it in a very practical way. Please interrupt me at whichever point you want to ask questions. I'm literally going to show a little bit about how I automate processes myself, how I work with R to make my life easier, especially to avoid a lot of point and click. There's enough of that in anyone's life, so the less the better. But also how we work on these things with customers, right? The idea is to generate a little bit of discussion. So again, if you see any point where you want to add something or ask a question, please do. So with that, as an introduction, I want to talk a little bit about the R in RPA, right? So RPA, we all know that as robotic process automation, and there's a beautiful definition on that on Wikipedia, right? So it's a form of business process automation technology based on metaphorical software robots or artificial intelligence and digital workers, sometimes referred to as software robotics. Now, I wanted to make a next slide with elves, right? So metaphorical are elves and whatnot, but I'm not good drawing. And I sort of, at the end, decided to make it a lot more boring. But that is how I imagine it, right? There is such a thing as R process automation. We can use R to automate a lot of processes, even ones that have nothing to do with statistics. But since the best language that you can use is the language that you know best, then why not build automatons with R? Because the artificial intelligence and this whole concept of digital workers, the way we see it is, it's scheduled R scripts and triggered R scripts. Now, immediately before somebody says, yes, but RPA and the triggers, and it can be so fancy and whatnot, yes, triggering R scripts, especially if it's an external trigger that needs to trigger something, there are ways around that, but it's for a whole separate talk. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to focus much more on scheduled scripts and little automatons, things that make our life easier as we are working, in our day-to-day. Good. So the talk will revolve around introducing what I consider an awesome trio, right, for automating things. That is system, that's an R function, a base R function. It is cron, that is part of Linux mostly, but there is something similar on Windows called the taskscheduleR. It does exactly the same thing. It works a little bit different, but not even that different. And then another R function from the Hatter package called post. For each of these, I will build up a little case. And again, feel free to jump in and give your point of view or your experience if you can add to that. So the case number one, John mentioned publishing a Data Latam podcast, right? But as you can imagine, and editing a podcast requires some things that are very repetitive. And I am the one actually doing the editing of the sound, the material. Then I have Diego's here who helps me with setting up the text, so the summary that we add to each podcast. And basically what I use there is system within R. And I will show you why, and I will show you how. So just for those who've never recorded podcasts, here we have Brian Platz of Flurry. He's the next podcast that is coming up on Datalatam, with a wonderful talk with him about the graph database that he and his company are making and bringing to and selling. So we have the chat, and we record that with Zoom. I then download that Zoom recording and I edit it in an editor. It's very simple editing. I just put the beginning and the end, and I make sure that there's no editing required. Maybe somebody coughs, or maybe somebody said something confidential that they shouldn't. I can edit that out, but usually it's the bare minimum, and then I need to publish it. But I publish it or republish it as an MP3 file. And even more, it's an MP3 file with a 192 constant bit rate. It's just characteristics of that file that we need to add. I've already, most of what is click and point, I've already thrown that out of the window a long time ago, because I don't like to click and point. I like to do things on the console, which is just my thing, right? It's not better, it's not worse, it's just the way I do it. So I need to run the following commands. I need to say, okay, we have, first I need to translate the M4A that comes out of Zoom to a WAV file. Then I edit, and the resulting file I need to bring to an MP3 file with certain characteristics. And this I cannot remember. I need to look it up every time that I do it. Even worse, for the ID3 tool, right? I need to put in that it is number 57, then it needs to read episode 57, Datalatam. For the first 4 years, I did that copy paste. Every time we had a podcast, I copy pasted that again, until I found the following trick. So if you do this on the command line, let me show you. We have the podcast here, right? The M4A file, which is the first one that I showed. What I do is I can copy paste this command right there, but I can also go to R. Now this is a little trick, right? So if I quit again, if you use R in the command line for these things, you can do something that says R, but then there's a lot of text. So what I do is I say quit. I say R quiet, and then there's no text. And I just made a little link that whenever I do RQ, quit. Whenever I say RQ, I get a quiet R, and I immediately have my my console. So now I want to run a command, and I can do that on the command line, but I can also ask R, do me, do this on Bash, do this as a system call. For instance, give me a list of the files that I have here, and it will return me the list, right? I literally can put in any file, any command that I want. So I can also put in the transition, the one that I had there. I will copy paste it, because we're talking about making things a little bit more efficient. So there we go. So what I would normally put on my command line, I can put here in R, and there it goes. It run the process. It did what we asked it to do. And if we say, well, let's do the same. Let's use the same. If we ask the list again, now I have an extra file that says episodio WAV, right? Of course, this is already too much work. And what we're talking about is about automating things to make it less cumbersome. So the next step is to take that, those are the conversions, and then say, look, if I have a file converted to WAF, and you put that as a package. So the following one, which is a little bit more extensive, is the one that I will show. Whoops, sorry. And excuse my Spanish, but it's that's the language I work in most of the day. So what I did to make my life easier, I say library crea podcast, create podcast, and now for the next step, I say convierte a MP3. with, of course, the name of the file. So that would be episode57.wav. And there it goes. It takes a little bit longer because this process for the audio encoding tool that I use, it takes a little bit longer. But the idea is that I wrote a little script. Then I put it into a small, really small package that I can share with anyone. So anyone on my team can take that same process and now encode files. And lo and behold, we have the third one, the MP3 right there. I can add a little bit extra and I just say, okay, now I want to tag with the MP3s and I want to tag the one that has MP3 behind, right? So I say, okay, that's the one I want to tag. And it says, well, what's the number of the podcast? Just to make things, it's 57, right? So I say 57. What is the year of publication? 2021. And it says, okay, I'll add it to the MP3 tags for Data Latam Podcast 57. And the code behind this, if you write it once, is very small, right? It's just a cat, like you've done a million times in your console. So if you need proof that I actually added the tags, that would be on the MP3 file. We see properties, and then I say audio, and like Data Latam podcast, Data Latam 30 minutes, monos sin datos. There it is. What we have found also with in our own processes, but with customers, and this is just it's not a random example, it's just an example, is that this really helps to make things simpler and faster, and that is what we're aiming at, right? Any questions or comments on this one? Again, comments because it's any feedback is welcome. No. Okay. Using R in the command line, to my mind, is something that relatively few people do, but it really gives you, an extra set of tools that are of your own making, and you can speed up things a lot. If you know a little bit on how, even in Windows, what you can do in PowerShell, a lot of that you can do with a system call as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there. But a second case, and we go a little bit more business processy in this one. It's an intelligent feed from mass mailing systems. So what we come across often is the need to run things regularly, once a day, once per hour, once per week. On Linux, it's called cron, and I work on Linux most of the time, so that is my focus there. There's the equivalent on Windows is called taskscheduleR, right? It does pretty much the same thing. And the example that I'd like to show you on how this can add value to our minds is, for instance, the typical connection that we need to make between, for instance, an ERP, right? Enterprise resource. Wow, that P just disappeared from my mind. But it's basically, thank you, enterprise research planning systems. For instance, because we want to, and this is the real case that we built for a customer, they built a model of customer segmentation in R. And that model for customer segmentation leads to directed emails that are sent out to their customers through mBlue. mBlue is just, it's like a MailChimp, but built in Argentina. It's what they're using a lot here. So the usual use case there is that we download things from the database. We get into customer segmentation, April, new V3, latest, Vanessa's version, I don't know what, right? There's a version, somebody did that work in Excel. And then with that same Excel, they upload it through the UI to be able to send out the emails. Now, the way that this can also be done is that we, first of all, take all the work that we've done in R, and essentially we turn them into extract, transform, and load scripts, right? There are scripts. So the first one will extract the data from the ERP, it will make the select, it will do the in-database transformations so that we don't pull everything. Lazy loading and dbplyr is our friend there. Then we make the transform, which is the application of predictions from pre-trained machine learning models. We place customers in groups. We fix everything that we need to fix to make sure that the right message goes out to the right person based on previous work. And then we send that customer list to mBlue. Everything that we have here is done automatically. There's nobody looking into that unless there's an issue, of course, right? There might be an issue, and that can range from a difference in the VPN, somebody changed the password, to a change in the API for the service where we're putting this to words. But that can also always occur. At the end, I'll highlight the need for monitoring, right? You need to monitor somehow whether things were successful. So in our cron job, which is the mechanism through which we make this run every day, there's more than one job that we need to do. First, we need to open the VPN because the server might be anywhere on AWS or GCP or maybe on-premise, wherever you want. And in this case, we need to open a VPN for to access the data. So we open a VPN, and then one by one, there's 1 minute in between, we run the scripts. It may be important to time these because sometimes part of this process might take 1 hour or it may take 2 hours. And then the beauty of being able to schedule things is that you can schedule it exactly for how long you actually want that to run. In the end, we use an API of mBlue to actually send this out. And when I say MPI or API, what I mean is the following. Sorry. When I say API, I will get into that in more detail in the next case where we talk about post, because this process is where we post it, where we send it using a RESTful API to another service to make it interoperable. But my focus here is on cron, right? And if you like to have an interface, or if you've never worked with a scheduler before, there's 2 packages written by the same people. One is cronR. It helps you set up cron jobs if you work on a Linux machine. And the other one is taskscheduleR. It helps you set up taskscheduleR tasks on Windows if you use that. And again, if you've never used this before, you're likely, you may have some use case where repeating something automatically without looking at it again, may make sense.
That's a quick question.
Sure.
In the last one, you had 3 steps and you schedule them like a minute apart. Why not put them in one script? Since they're going to run sequentially, why not put them in one script and they'll just run right after each other?
Right. So what happens, John, is that since we do this very often, we get best practices. So we know that we run the real risk that one of these needs to be timed after the other, and we're just preparing for that. In this case, they run very fast, but if we need to time it a little bit different, then it's already there, it's already ready. That is the only reason. Absolutely, you could join them all and have them run in one go, but we just, this is to prepare for eventualities, and it's the best practice that we have found works well for these scenarios.
Okay, got
it. Yeah. It also has to do, John, now that you asked, that maintaining them, right, and even when writing them. So sending out the resulting file to mBlue, in this case, it's more than one file that comes out. So maintaining this file separately is just a little bit easier than doing it in one large script.
Frans, with Miguel
Yes.
here. I cannot place the Shiny script. Why Shiny script? Why you run it?
So if I understand you well, you're asking why is it in the Shiny server folder?
Yeah. Yes, the script is.
The script is not a Shiny script, right? The script is just an R script. The reason it is in the Shiny server folder is because we built an interface in Shiny where they can manage some of this group selection, where they can manage certain aspects that will then impact what runs in the evening. That is the only reason.
Okay, understood.
other reason, or the nice byproduct of this, if you're going to set this up on a server, is that these scripts run as Shiny. You see here, there's a root cron job, sudo cron tab, and they run as Shiny. So it's a little bit less permissive. You don't, it's just one user and it doesn't have root access to everything else. It gives a slight advantage to security. But well spotted, Miguel. It was a little detail. Brian has a question here in the chat. He asks, but what if extract data takes more than 1 minute? Won't the next script start? Yes, it will. And that was my point right now. You need to figure this out beforehand. If you cannot predict how long something works, there's ways around that as well. You can make one thing depend on the other. But that exactly, to be able to put it then in 20 minutes or 1 hour is the reason that usually when we deploy, we put it as 3 separate scripts and 3 separate cron jobs. Does that answer your question, Brian? Fantastic. Anything else before we move on? When you are first, task scheduler works fine because everything, you have an interface for, you can have an interface for it from R if you wish. But then if you get into the nitty-gritty of how do I set up that 1 minute or 30 minutes, in the 20 years I've used cron, I'm not able to remember. So cron.guru is where I always go because I think it's a very cool name. There may be 100 sites that offer the same functionality. One of you may have your preference, but figuring out when to start those jobs, what the coding is in cron, you can find pretty easily. And once it works, it works. Fantastic. So having said that, we go into case 3. And case 3 is again getting into this marketing scenario where, in this case, we're going to do something with Zoom attendance, like the webinar we're doing right now. The demo is going to be slightly different simply because my demo, I cannot do it on our CRM because recording, etc. And my trial instance was revoked. So I have a different demo for you at the ready. And we'll see that shortly. So, one of the fabulous 3 here is post. Now, post is one of the key functions in the Hatter package, the HTTR package, that offers us access to the HTTP protocol, the HTTP verbs, like get and post and delete and whatnot. Get and post are the ones that we most often use. Get is essentially what you do when you are pulling something from a website. And post is one of the ways that you can put data on, through HTTP, offer that to a service or put it elsewhere. And that is the example that we're going to look at. I find it, really intriguing how helpful it can be, because this scenario is very common, right? So we do a Zoom webinar. Now Zoom records, if you have the webinar functionality, you actually have a register of all the participants. You can see when they came into the webinar. You can see when they went out of the webinar. So you have a measure of interest in the topic. And that measure of interest in the topic is really cool for your CRM, because that means that if, I don't know, if we're talking about automating business processes, then we can see, well, who stayed more than 80% of the talk. And we can send a targeted email to that selection within our database. I use the same example, mBlue, there because I mentioned it before, right? That just serves the purpose of sending out emails of interest that I have for the targeted group. Usually the process is having somebody, a person who downloads the Zoom data, then uploads it to the CRM, then downloads the CRM data, then uploads it to mBlue. And the beauty of using R, because you can work very effectively with, how do you call that, with APIs, is that you can go to the documentation of the Zoom API and the Emblude API and see how can I get things and how can I post things, right? That's the essence. Now, if you look at what the resulting point is that we have Zoom, we have an API call, brings it to CRM and then to Emblude. And for those of you who might not have heard that term before, an API is an application program interface, right? So you're not, it's just a set of instructions that allow you to send and receive data from software applications. When people talk about a RESTful API, it gets even better in the sense that the entry level is lower, the technical level is lower, because what you end up is with an HTTP address that you can call on to do something. And that doing something is what I want to show you next. So I need my other, here we go. I'm here. Oh, I was already there. I see. I'm here, and somebody. Oh, sorry. There we go. So we have an environment that we use for our tasks and code reviews and stuff like that. We build it on Gitty. It's a really nice open source project where we can, that you can install. We install it for each and every customer, and we have tickets. Now, I didn't close my my test this morning where I wanted to make really sure that it worked, but let's leave them there, because what I want to show you is that in fact it does work. So I have a little example here, and we're going to make this a little bit smaller. And what I want is my console and nothing else. Here we are, and nothing else. So in the presentation, I showed you this call. Let me walk you through that. This is a typical call to any service, right? We have the library that's called Hatter. There's a couple of verbs that we can use to interact with APIs, with RESTful APIs. And typically, they have something like this. They have an address, a URL, and the end of the URL, we usually call an endpoint, right? That's what we're calling. In this case, we're calling a repository in the demos project for the Cleveland R user group, and then there's issues. Here we can see that right here, sorry. Right, so I'm in my demos Cleveland, that is where I am, and here we see demos Cleveland issues. There we are. The documentation should point you out to this of any service that you use, and it will be relatively similar. We need to add some authorization. So in this case, there's a token that gives us the authorization to do what we need to do. And we have the content type that is JSON. What is JSON? It is the list of content that I'm going to send out. Now, if I remember well, I did not have, where are you? Here we are. Right. So this is the one that works. It's still shared on the screen, so it doesn't really matter. I will change the token later. Oh, where are you? Here we are with the tickets. So if I put this into my console and I call this out, then let's make a new example. Example from code. And it says, okay, there we are. If I refresh here and I cross my fingers, there we are. It's a new example from code. The beauty of this is that, you can suddenly do a lot of different things. I know people who have, for instance, on their website, they have a little form, a little web form that let's one of the customers create an issue, and it automatically sends out that issue to their configuration management tool, right? Whichever tool works the same on GitHub or whatever you use. And it sends automatically a nice message, nicely formatted message to the customer saying, oh, okay, thank you very much. We've documented this as issue so and such and so. We have taken it a little bit further. So what we can do when we're working in, I hope this goes back. So when we're working in, how do you call that, in our studio, so I can ask for a list of current tickets, and then it will send me a list of the current tickets assigned to me for this particular project. So I have to invalidate this token before John actually publishes this on YouTube. And that is one of the things that I have there. I can directly go to that particular issue and then continue working. Is this easier than just making the ticket? Well, you can, that's debatable, but it is a process that we help to automate in this way. One important thing is that the team tickets, it's the same call to that same database where we're just looking at other tickets that other people are doing so that I have the context of what my team members are working on. And maybe they're working on a blocker or not yet, or it just helps to do, it just helps in the communication that I have with them. Right. Any questions on this case? No, good. So let me find my presentation again. Yes, this is not it. Here we are. Building API calls. I don't know. At first it's a little bit daunting because the way of thinking is a little bit different. And the thing that maybe I find, or that that we as a team sometimes find most interesting as an issue to solve, is how to send data in the body, right? And where do we put a limit? Is that 500 rows of something, or is 500,000 still okay? It all depends. But it is a really nice tool to have in your toolbox for things that that are difficult to solve otherwise. The other thing is that especially with these kind of calls, and I showed you a process, right, from Zoom to a CRM and then to our mailing system. Take small steps, make sure that each of them have impact. And if you're organized with your code, for instance, working in packages or have a way to share that, then it will start accruing pretty quickly. And after the first one, you're 3-4 months after that, suddenly other ideas come. And since it's relatively, it doesn't need to cost that much time to take the next step, slowly you will start to build more than one automated process within your organization, or even if you're working alone with whatever process you are working on, right? That was the reason I showed you the podcast example, because even by your lonesome, it can be really handy to have things that you can just do faster. Great. So last but not least, one of the things that we have found is that if you're automating processes, you will definitely have a need to monitor how they're doing, right? Brian, you had that great question. Well, what if it takes longer than 1 minute? Well, what if it takes only 1 minute now, but then suddenly in 3 months, it starts taking longer than 1 minute, and my second step in the process just falls flat on its face. Shiny comes into the rescue there as well, right? Because this is sort of the standard. It says in Spanish, it says customer there, cliente, right? Because this is our go-to template for a monitoring dashboard, where we go to the bare minimum, right? We just say, well, your process 1 didn't run. Again, it's the templates, so they're all in red, but what we want is to show them in green. And we show them in green with the last time it run and how often it runs, right? In this case, it's once every quarter. In this case, it's each month and each month again. Some of them will be daily. Again, we will set them up. what people end up seeing is this one monitor that has, how many processes we've implemented, and it's very helpful. It's helpful, one, because even though you get a message, right, if something fails, at some point your direct report, your boss will come up and say, well, what is this stuff you've been doing automating processes? Pulling out a dashboard like this gives immediate visibility. A long, detailed instruction on how FFmpeg now accepts it. No, you've lost attention already. But pulling up a dashboard with everything in green and saying, look, these are the processes that are running in R, and it's all in green. Fantastic. Then you've got the message across. We do use things like R Markdown. So we like to run those processes if sometimes not as an R script, R Markdown, so that we have output in HTML, so that we can see whatever issue occurred. Some section might be there also to show, to have some basic tests, and even use something like, it's not glue, it's the other one. It sounds like a turtle. What we can use to send out email messages in R. I'm sorry, the package just went off the top of my head. Helps with that. Helps with announcing to whomever is in charge that there was something wrong with the process. Any questions so far? Blastula, thank you, John. Yes, sounds like a turtle. I don't know why it doesn't sound like a turtle at all, but it is Blastula, yes. Yeah. Okay. So in closing, right, the question that usually follows this, can I see some code? Well, most of these things are very internal or are customer based. So not actually the examples. If you need something, just send me a message and I'll be happy to share what I can share. But we are sending out, we have published some of these packages that we use internally as open source code, and they are on cron already. So we pronounce it cronR, right? It's a less annoying CRM. So cronR is our connection to our CRM, right? We can pull out pipelines, we can send out updates. It's the way we manage our sales dashboard is based on this package, right? I'm not sure how many others use it, but it's there for anybody. Or even if you want an example on how to build on numerous endpoints, that might be one. The other one is GitTR, right? When we present Gitty, we present it as Explorer. We have made our own translation. We have done quite a bit of work to make sure that it fits with our data ops processes. But if you use GitTR in any way, this package has a lot of those endpoints implemented. You're most welcome to implement more, or you send us an issue. And also you're most welcome to have a look at it on how to set up a package that is focused on being a wrapper around an API of any application, right? So John, with that, thank you very much. That would be my talk.
Thank you very much, Frans. Let's give people a second if they want to ask some questions in the chat or unmute themselves. But yeah, very great talk. I love automating things, and so those are some great tips. One question I did have that came up. So I run into either I try and run things on Windows or other people do, and so that causes all kinds of issues. So do you have any thoughts on? So you were using System. Have you any thoughts on using System 2, or when you should wrap things in like sh quote? That saves like basically spaces and file names are gonna get you real quick. Like if you don't use sh quote.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pain. So I always make an enormous effort to stay as positive as I can about using these things on Windows. But in reality, if you really want to do a lot, just propose using a Linux server, right? The relationship between R and Linux is very cozy.
Yes.
For all kinds of historical reasons. Things can work on Microsoft, but it can be a bit of a pain. And we've run into, like issues you've mentioned, we've run into many unexpected issues. We do sometimes when we have to, because especially in banks, right, there can be limitations on the use of Linux. Or even the use of servers that are outside of IT maintenance. So there's a lot of rules and regulations. So sometimes we have to, but it never has our preference.
While we wait for others, another question is, so do you use Docker when you're deploying these scripts on different servers? Yeah, are you using Docker containers?
Sometimes. So for these, we use Docker containers a lot, right? So we deploy a lot, especially APIs that we write in Plumber, we deploy with Docker. But for these, in particular, the ones that I showed, most of them are the R scripts or are Markdown scripts. And the reason for that, John, is that we want to make the maintenance of the scripts that we're deploying as within reach as possible for the organization. Mm-hmm. The moment we bring it to Docker, it may have a benefit. It's all very fancy, but it makes maintenance a lot harder. Mm-hmm. What we're really aiming at is saying, look, even with the example that Brian gave, if you get a failing because it runs too fast, we'll just set it up in 5 minutes. You can do that. You don't need us. Mm-hmm. We want that because it's very empowering for teams to be able to automate their own processes, or even to be able to make those small changes to adjust it to whatever they're facing that day.
That's a good point. If you're trying to hand it off, the automated process off, putting it in a Docker, there's trade-offs.
Yes, and being able to maintain these things, have an easy entry point for maintaining. That's another point why we use our Markdown, because we can give detailed instructions so that somebody new in 6 months comes in, they go green with fear of what they might find. And then they go like, well, okay, hello, this is to do this, 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 this. And they can make the change with their boss breathing in their necks.
May I ask? I can ask a question.
Please.
Hi, Frans. We met briefly at the 2020 RStudio conference. Well, I gave that for each talk there. So thanks for this. This is really nice. My question
Brian, sorry, I'm very slow. I'm horribly at the names, but the for each talk, right. I know exactly who you are. So nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you again. Thanks for coming to Cleveland virtually and giving such a nice talk. Really nice. So here's the question. Have you encountered with your clients any resistance or pushback on using R in automated, business processes rather than interactive analytics, but in back-end processes in kind of enterprise applications? And if you have, how did you address those concerns?
So, Brian, the answer is a clear yes, right? I'm debating whether to use this word, but we use a little bit of a guerrilla tactic in this sense. We are very focused on empowering the data analytics team. And we are helping them not to depend on the IT team with all their fancy processes, etc., but also their requirement documents, and they're 3 to 6 months, and maybe we never come to the one thing that you need. So helping the data analytics team to stand their ground, to be able to automate the data-related processes is what we are very much focused on. And that helps us sort of go out of the way of that difficult discussion that you are mentioning, right? With that, we show that things can be done. And, from there, a lot of things can happen within an organization. But that team, that group is our main focus point. And it's them that we're trying to empower to automate things without the need of IT support, but within the IT and governance and security policies that have been set for the organization. And that is the sort of the balance that we try to establish. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, your insights in that regard would probably make another really interesting talk.
I'd love to give it, but I'm not sure. I need to confer with with others. Because Brian, it's maybe more for a cup of tea or a beer or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good bar. Yes, I get it.
Right.
No, but I mean, I think R has a place in these. Clearly, I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of difference between R or Python or things like that. But Python is much more accepted for some reason in these contexts, and I think it's just inertia, or people just aren't used to seeing R in the back end. But yeah.
Brian, I've been invited to last year a talk about scaling up R processes on Kubernetes. And the first question that I got when I got into this lobby of speakers and whatnot was the organizer. You know, he sort of looked at me puzzled and said, "But scaling up with R, why?" Right? For us, it makes a lot of sense because there's so much domain knowledge that we can translate into code using R that I am convinced, this is my personal opinion, but I am convinced we would not be able to translate into code using Python simply because of the characteristics of language and the characteristics of the people having that domain knowledge, right? R just seems to be a better fit. That the logical next step is to automate and to scale up with exactly that same language, right? The rest is just a matter of taste, to my mind, again, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we're getting close to the hour, so let's call it here. Thanks so much, Frans, again. This is a great talk. You've inspired me and hopefully others to continue automating processes. Because for me, it's also mistakes. It's so much easier to make a mistake if you're trying to do the same thing over and over again. If you can automate it, you know it happened exactly how you wanted it to go. So thank you everyone for attending. And we hope to see you for the June meetup. Where's my note? The 23rd, I believe, is the next one. So hope to see you there. Bye, everybody.